Hey guys, tonight we're going inside something impossibly loud, but you'll never hear it. You're going to lie back, eyes closed or barely open, and drift down into the storm inside your own head. Not a hurricane with rain or a thunderstorm you can see out the window. This one's deeper, more permanent. It's always on. You live inside it. Right now, this very second, billions of cells in your brain are sending tiny pulses of electricity to each other, lighting up in coordinated storms you never feel. That thought you just had about your blanket? That wasn't random. That was a storm cell flaring up and disappearing. Your brain didn't just make that thought. It was that thought. And here's the reality check. You probably won't survive this. I mean it in the softest, most cosmic way possible. You won't live long enough to consciously witness even a fraction of the thoughts your brain will create while you're alive. And yet, they define you, shape you, build your dreams and fears. And you barely get to see how any of it actually works. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, post your city and local time. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie there, and you think you're still. But inside your head, a storm is moving. Not like clouds passing lazily overhead, but more like bursts of starlight ricocheting across a night sky. Not even silence is silent in there. Imagine a huge city, bigger than anything you've ever seen. Every window and every building flickers with light. Every street lamp glows. Every home has a person inside, doing something, reacting, remembering, deciding, regretting. That's your brain, only replace the people with neurons. And instead of light switches, they use electric pulses. Instead of speech, they use ions. They're not quiet. They're unbelievably active. You are, right now, generating somewhere between 15 and 25 watts of electricity, enough to power a small light bulb. But unlike that bulb, your brain doesn't just glow. It sparks. It thinks. Each little spark of thought is happening inside one of your 86 billion neurons. Imagine trying to shake hands with 86 billion people. Now imagine that each of them can reach out with tiny fingers, called dendrites, and talk to up to 10,000 other neurons. That's not a network. That's a thunderstorm of data. But it doesn't feel that way, does it? You don't wake up in a morning and think, the circuits are firing nicely today. You just think, where's my phone? That's the strange thing. You never feel your thoughts being made. You only feel the thoughts once they're already here. There's no loading screen. No little progress bar that shows your brain spinning up. It's just there. And that's part of the magic. Even when you try to think of nothing, your brain rebels. Thoughts leak in through the cracks. A memory. A random line from a song. A worry you swore you were done with. They rise like bubbles in deep water, because your brain never really stops. It works even harder when you sleep. But before we get there, let's rewind. Because if we're going to understand how your brain makes thoughts, we first have to understand what those thoughts are. They're not just little ideas. They're not words with sound. They're not memories floating in the dark. Thoughts are patterns of activity. They're what happens when a particular group of neurons lights up together, in a specific sequence, at a specific speed, with just the right amount of electricity and chemical conversation to trigger awareness. And they don't happen in one spot. There's no thought center in your brain. No little glowing command room that produces a new idea on a typewriter. Instead, thoughts are born out of movement, spread, distributed. It's like trying to hear a single violinist in a thunderstorm of instruments and realizing the music is only beautiful because of the chaos. Your thoughts come from motion, from timing, from tuning. And you're not even the one doing it. You don't tell your neurons when to fire. You don't choose which thoughts show up. You respond to them. You notice them. Which brings us to the strangest part. If you don't control your thoughts, then what are you? That question sits at the center of every philosophy ever written, every religion ever formed, every science that's dared to ask why anything exists at all. You are the one hearing the thoughts, and maybe slowly learning to guide them. But first, you have to watch them form. From the beginning. From the quiet storm. So tonight, while you lie still and your limbs forget gravity, we're going to go into the storm. past the outer clouds of sensation and memory, into the electrical ballet beneath. We'll see where the flashes come from, why they come, and what they might mean. It won't all make sense. Some of it will feel like you're floating in too many facts. But don't worry. The storm was never supposed to be tidy. It was only ever meant to be alive. You're floating now, softly, slowly, deeper into the electrical sea that lives beneath your skull. Don't try to control it. Just watch it flicker. What you're sensing isn't metaphor. It's literal. Your thoughts, every single one, are built from electrical charges. Tiny movements of ions. Not magic. Not mysticism. Just biology, wrapped in voltage. You can picture it like this. Each of your neurons is a microscopic battery. It holds a charge, maintains a boundary, and waits. And when it decides to speak, when it fires, it sends an electrical signal zooming down its axon, a long wire-like tail, toward the next neuron. That signal is called an action potential. You don't feel it, but it's happening millions of times per second, all across your brain. Every flick of awareness, every face you remember, every random craving for chocolate at midnight, it all rides on that pulse. A pulse that lasts less than 1,000th of a second. Fast, right? But it's not just speed. It's precision. Because here's the twist. A single neuron isn't particularly smart. In fact, alone, it's basically a yes/no switch. It either fires or it doesn't. Binary. Oh. But together, when thousands, millions of them link up and talk in synchronized rhythms, that's when the magic begins. That's when thought happens. It's like watching fireflies. If you only see one blink, it's cute. If you see thousands blinking together, in time and rhythm, you start to feel wonder. That's your brain. That's the electrical sea inside you. It never sleeps. Even when you dream, it pulses. Even when you meditate, when you go quiet, when you empty your mind, your brain is still alive with electrical patterns. The only thing that changes is which waves are dominant. Because not all brain activity is the same. There are rhythms to it. Oscillations. Your brainwaves come in flavors. Delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. They're not just cute science words. They're different speeds, different vibes. Right now, if you're getting sleepy, your brain might be sliding into theta waves, slow, smooth, hypnotic. The kind of rhythm that makes the world feel dreamy, like it's sliding just out of focus. If you're fully asleep later, delta waves take over. Deeper, heavier, like gravity for consciousness. But earlier during the day, you were in beta, alert, focused, maybe even anxious. And sometimes, when you're solving a complex puzzle or having a moment of brilliant clarity, you get a burst of gamma. Your thoughts are tied to those rhythms. You don't think with them, you think through them. They shape how much information you can hold at once, how you interpret time, whether you feel panicked or calm, whether you remember something or let it slip. And even more fascinating, your brainwaves sync with what's around you. Listening to music, your brain starts to mirror the beat. Watching a sad movie, your mirror neurons fire along with the characters. Sitting beside someone who's calm, breathing slowly, your own heart rate and brainwaves may shift in response. You are porous, open, electrically social. This isn't New Age fluff. This is real-time resonance. Your brain is an orchestra, constantly tuning to its environment and also to itself. But here's where things get truly strange. All this electricity, all this beautiful, flickering movement, it doesn't happen inside your neurons. It happens across them, between, around, through. The electricity flows along the axons, yes, but the real storm, the real complexity, comes from the connections, the gaps, the tiny places where one neuron reaches out to another and almost touches. Those spaces are called synapses. And in those microscopic gaps, your thoughts don't just jump. They transform. They change form from electric to chemical to electric again. Because when an electrical signal hits the end of a neuron, it can't leap the gap directly. So your brain releases tiny packets of chemicals, neurotransmitters, into the synapse. They float across, bind to the next neuron, and trigger to the next electrical spike. Over and over. Billions of times per second. all to keep the quiet storm alive. And this is where it gets wild. Because those chemicals, they're not just messengers. They're mood setters. They're memory markers. They're the reason a single smell can collapse you into a memory from childhood. The reason a sad song doesn't just hurt, it electrifies you. The sea isn't just electric. It's chemical too. And those chemicals shape the storm. You'll feel that more in the next section. When the whispers between the neurons start taking on tone and color and meaning. But for now, just float here. Let the light flicker behind your closed eyes. You are a lightning storm in slow motion, a sea of sparks, and you're only just beginning to see the shape of your thoughts. You're still drifting. Your body might be nestled into stillness now, arms warm under the covers, the ceiling fading from view, but inside, you are brighter than the night sky. Because in this moment, you're not just a person. You are 86 billion stars glowing in the dark, each one alive, each one aware in its own strange, silent way. These stars aren't scattered across space. They're packed together, folded into a 3-pound universe inside your skull. Neurons, your brain's fireflies, each with the power to change everything. But here's something wild. You weren't born with all of them. Sure, you had a lot at birth, but your brain kept growing, rewiring, trimming, sculpting itself based on what you saw, felt, touched, feared. It built itself around your experiences. So the stars in your brain today, they're not just cells. They're a record of you, of the languages you learned, the hands you held, the heartbreaks you didn't talk about. Every neuron that survived the storm did so because it mattered. And they don't just sit there. Each neuron reaches, like a tree in a forest, sending out branches, dendrites, to meet its neighbors. Thousands of tiny arms stretch out, listening for input. Each one is tuned to certain signals, certain frequencies. You've got neurons that love motion, neurons that crave color, neurons that fire when you hear a certain kind of laughter or recognize the scent of jasmine on a rainy sidewalk. Together, they create your personal constellation. And at the end of those dendritic branches, on long spindly axons, lie the synaptic terminals, like fingers gently offering information to the next cell. And the more you use a connection between neurons, the stronger it gets. That's not poetry. That's called Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together, which basically means practice changes your brain. Every time you repeat a thought, a reaction, a behavior, your brain strengthens the pathways that support it. Even if that thought is, I'm not good enough. Even if it's, I can't do this. Even if they're going to leave me. The brain doesn't judge. It builds what it's told to build. So those 86 billion neurons, they're not just blinking lights. They're architects. They're sculptors of your identity. And they don't build alone. Each one of them is supported by cells you rarely hear about. Glial cells, the unsung heroes. They don't send electric signals, but they support the neurons like stage crew behind the scenes. They clean up waste, provide nutrients, regulate the chemical environment. And in some cases, they even help direct traffic, modulating how fast or how often certain neurons fire. In fact, for every neuron in your brain, you've got roughly one glial cell backing it up. That's a lot of support staff, and they're doing their jobs without you ever knowing they exist. But you do know something else. You know, when a thought arrives, it can feel like a click, a shift, an image. Sometimes it has words. Sometimes it's just a pull behind the eyes. That's a network activating, a pattern firing, a constellation lighting up for half a second, then fading. Some neurons ignite in patterns so often, they practically become habits. You think the same thing every day, worry the same worry, replay the same memory, as if the past were still unfinished. And in a way, to your brain, it is, because each thought, each pattern, reaffirms itself. The more it fires, the easier it is to fire again, like a path in a field that gets clearer with every footstep. Even when you sleep, those pathways don't rest. Your brain rehearses, strengthens connections, clears out cluttered ones. Sometimes it even rewrites. You don't just carry a brain. You carry a living library of yourself. And that's where things get fragile. Because some constellations, some neural patterns aren't helpful. They repeat the wrong things, loop the old fears, keep you awake at 2:17 a.m., rehearsing what you should have said 6 years ago. And your brain, ever loyal, strengthens those too, unless you interrupt it, unless you build a new path. But to do that, you need to understand how these neurons connect. Because when one fires, it doesn't just light up its neighbor randomly. There are rules, thresholds, chemistry. And sometimes it takes hundreds of signals, dozens of neurons all saying, yes, fire now, to make one downstream neuron spark. This is why your brain doesn't just erupt in chaos every time you get a whiff of perfume or a flash of a face. It filters, waits, confirms. But when the signal does get through, when enough neurons say this matters, the pattern spreads. That's the quiet storm growing louder. It becomes a thought, then a feeling, then a memory, or sometimes just a twitch of your hand under the blanket. You are not just a thinker. You are a participant in a microscopic drama that has been unfolding every second of your life. And the leading actors, your neurons, they don't look like you. They don't even know you exist. But they are you. Each one a sun. Each one holding a piece of your infinite inner sky. You're sinking deeper now, somewhere between waking and dreaming, where the storm gets quieter but never stops. Because even when everything feels still, your brain is throwing lightning between billions of tiny bridges. And those bridges, they're the reason you can think at all. We've talked about neurons, their electricity, their rhythms. But now we need to focus on the spaces between them. The little voids, the quiet gaps that hold everything together. These are your synapses. They're microscopic, unseeable without a powerful microscope. But they outnumber the stars in the galaxy. You have somewhere around 100 trillion synapses in your brain. Let that echo for a second. 100 trillion connections, each one a tiny gap between one neuron and the next. A space where the electricity from one can become the electricity of another, if the signal gets through. And this is where your brain gets elegant. Because a synapse isn't just a doorway. It's a gatekeeper, a translator, a bouncer at the club. When a neuron fires, the electrical impulse travels down the axon like a spark down a wire until it reaches the very tip. That's where the electricity stops. Because electricity can't jump the gap. It's not allowed to. So the neuron has to convert. At the synapse, the electrical signal becomes chemical. Little bubble-like packets, called vesicles, burst open and release neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. These neurotransmitters drift, just barely, across the gap, like pollen floating from one flower to another. They bind to the next neuron's receptors. And if enough of them connect, if the balance is just right, the receiving neuron fires. Electricity is born again. It's like a secret handshake. If the gesture isn't right, the door doesn't open. No spark, no thought. And that process, electric to chemical to electric again, happens billions of times a second. While you lie there, breathing slowly, listening to the sound of your own mind. Each synapse is tuned to specific chemicals. Each one reacts differently depending on what it receives. And this is where neurotransmitters become the quiet architects of your mood, your memory, and your mind. Dopamine, the motivator. A burst of yes energy. The reward chemical. Not just for pleasure, but for anticipation. It fires before you get the thing you want. Not after. Serotonin, the stabilizer. It keeps your mood level. Helps you feel grounded. A deficiency here, and the sky gets gray. Inside your head, GABA, the brake pedal. It slows things down, reduces anxiety, puts a hush over the storm when it gets too loud. Glutamate, the accelerator. It excites, stimulates. It's everywhere because your thoughts need fire, not just calm. And acetylcholine, the focus agent. It helps you learn, helps you remember, guides attention like a spotlight in a dark theater. All of this, all these chemicals floating across synaptic gaps, they shape your inner life. They decide whether a thought fades or becomes a memory, whether a voice in your head whispers or screams, Whether you wake in peace or panic, you don't command them. They are you. But they can change. And here's the part most people miss. Synapses are plastic. No, not like Tupperware. I mean neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change its structure, its connections, based on experience. You can literally build new synapses, new bridges, new pathways, by practicing something, by paying attention, by choosing a different thought again and again. And over time, the ones you ignore, they weaken, like abandoned trails in the woods. Eventually, they disappear. Your brain doesn't just respond to life. It learns from it. It shapes itself based on what you repeat. So the storm? It's not chaos. It's sculpting. And you are the artist. Even if you don't realize you're holding the brush. That's why healing takes time. Why unlearning a trauma isn't just emotional, it's physical. You're rewiring bridges that once fired in fear. You're building new ones, slow and quiet, that fire in safety. And those old synapses? They don't go quietly. They try to stay alive, which is why you still flinch at certain sounds, still react to things that aren't threats anymore. It's not weakness, it's wiring. But wiring can be changed. The thoughts you think most often are building the roads of tomorrow. And while you can't control every spark, you can guide which ones get repeated. Each synapse you strengthen becomes a little easier to cross. And the next time, even easier. Until one day the thought just arrives without effort, without pain. The storm doesn't stop, but it learns your rhythm. And that's where you start to regain your power. Not by silencing your thoughts, but by building new bridges for better ones to follow. You're deep now. You've let the noise of the outside world fall away. No cars, no phones, just the soft flicker of 1,000 thoughts drifting across your inner sky. And they feel calm, don't they? Like ripples in a pool, gentle, rhythmic, almost natural. But that rhythm, that texture, it doesn't come from electricity alone. It comes from chemical whispers. Because neurons don't just fire. They listen. They whisper to each other in molecules. And those molecules are what shape the flavor of your thoughts, the feel of your internal weather, and sometimes the shape of your entire day. You've met a few of these messengers already. Dopamine, serotonin, GABA. But let's look closer. Because these neurotransmitters aren't just happy chemicals or stress hormones. They are rules, languages, filters. They decide which thoughts rise and which sink back into the dark. Take dopamine, for example. It's not pleasure, not exactly. It's motivation, anticipation, that sense of I want this, even before you know why. When you crave something, chocolate, approval, your phone lighting up, it's dopamine. When you feel driven to finish a project, stay up all night, or just refresh one more time, that's dopamine too. It's the voice saying, yes, go. A spark that pushes certain thoughts forward, gives them a spotlight. But that spotlight isn't always helpful. Because the more dopamine a thought receives, the more often it returns. Even if it's a thought you hate, even if it hurts. Your brain doesn't distinguish good from bad in those moments. It distinguishes salient from boring, important from irrelevant. That's how addictions form, how obsessions take root. The brain says, this matters. Do it again, even when you wish it wouldn't. Then there's serotonin. Cooler, smoother. It doesn't spike. It stabilizes. It says, you're okay. Not euphoric. Not ecstatic. Just okay. Safe. Balanced. People often think of serotonin as the happy chemical. But in truth, it's more like the mood anchor. When serotonin levels drop, the ground tilts. You get irritable, restless, disconnected. The thoughts feel faster or flatter. The world starts to seem far away. And worst of all, you can't tell if it's the world that changed, just your mind. You've also got GABA in your corner. Gamma-aminobutyric acid. Yes, that name sounds like it belongs in a Marvel movie, but trust, it's the chillest chemical in your brain. GABA is your built-in volume control. When things get too loud up there, too many signals firing, too much noise, GABA steps in and says, "Hey, let's slow this down." It's the difference between calm and panic, between a racing heart and a slow, sleepy breath. If you've ever done deep breathing and felt yourself physically shift into calm, that's GABA. If you've taken a warm bath and noticed your thoughts dissolve into nothing, GABA again. Then there's norepinephrine. Sharp, bright, like a floodlight in the dark. It kicks in when you're startled. When something grabs your attention and your brain says, "Alert, stay alive." It's part of your fight or flight system. But it also helps with focus, memory, and learning. A little norepinephrine, and you're sharp. Too much, and you're anxious. Too little, and you're foggy. Your brain has to walk a chemical tightrope every moment of your life. Now imagine, all of these neurotransmitters are floating across millions of synapses right now, in patterns too vast to imagine. They don't just shape thought. They are thought. They give weight to one idea over another. They tint memory in color or shadow. They make certain emotions stick, and others fade like dreams in the morning. You are not a blank slate. You are a shifting canvas, painted in molecules. And here's something else to hold on to. These chemicals change with experience. The more you practice gratitude, the easier dopamine flows from little things. The more you meditate, the more GABA knows how to regulate stress. The more you reflect, journal, breathe deeply, talk kindly to yourself, the more serotonin and acetylcholine learn how to keep you steady. You're not stuck. You're adaptive. You are the artist, the canvas, and the brush. Because at the end of the day, every thought, no matter how simple or strange, is the result of a chemical conversation. A chain of whispers. A subtle argument among neurons about what matters and what doesn't. And when those conversations change, so do you. So as you lie here now, just watching your breath drift in and out, know that your thoughts aren't random. They're sculpted, whispered into place by messengers that know your history, your patterns, your storms. And just as they shaped you, you can shape them back. You're still, breathing easy, your limbs soft, your mind quiet, but not empty. Inside, the architecture of thought continues its silent labor. Now it's time to see the builders behind the curtain. Because thoughts don't just swirl randomly. They're not loose fireworks. They're guided, structured, shaped by the architecture of your brain, regions designed over millions of years, each playing its part in the storm. Let's start with a big one. The cerebral cortex. That wrinkled outer layer you've probably seen in pictures, the gray matter that looks like a giant walnut. That's where most of the action happens. It's where thoughts take on form and language, where you plan, reason, remember, imagine. It's divided into lobes, each with its specialty. Your frontal lobe, that's your command center. It handles decision-making, focus, and your ability to resist punching a vending machine when your snack gets stuck. The parietal lobe, that's where spatial awareness lives, your sense of where your body is in space. It's how you know your toes exist, even under the blanket. The occipital lobe processes visual input. Everything you see, this room, your memories, the flicker of images behind your eyelids, it's all stitched together here. Even when your eyes are closed, your brain keeps visualizing. And then there's the temporal lobe, where language and sound find meaning. It doesn't just hear, it interprets. It lets you recognize voices, understand words, even recall music from years ago, unprompted. Each of these lobes work together, sharing data across billions of neural highways. But beneath that surface layer, that's where things get primal. Let's go down, lower, deeper, to your limbic system. This is your emotional core, your gut reactions, the part of you that doesn't think in words, feels, smells that punch you with memory. That's the limbic system. Flashbacks, fear, desire, longing, nostalgia. These live down here. At the center of this emotional engine is the amygdala, a tiny almond-shaped structure responsible for your fear response. It's constantly scanning for threats. Fast, paranoid, essential. If you've ever jumped at a shadow before realizing it's just your laundry basket, that's the amygdala doing its job. It'd rather you survive a false alarm than miss a real one. Next to it is the hippocampus, your memory librarian. It decides what gets saved, what gets forgotten, and how your memories are stitched together. It doesn't just store things, it tags them. With emotion, with importance. That's why some memories burn vivid and others dissolve. Then we've got the thalamus, your brain's air traffic control. All your senses, except smell skips the line, route through here. It decides where the information goes. Touch, sight, sound. It filters and delivers it to the right cortical neighborhood. Without the thalamus, your brain would be overwhelmed by noise. And wrapping all of this in a tight, silent embrace is the brainstem, your survival core. It regulates your heartbeat, your breathing, keeps your lungs moving while you sleep, even when you've completely forgotten they exist. This is the scaffold, the architecture, the layers of thought. Some regions handle logic, others emotion. Some regulate focus, others store your childhood. And they're all wired together, cross-talking constantly, like overlapping weather systems. One storm front moves in emotion, another sweeps across logic. Sometimes they clash, sometimes they merge. Ever felt a wave of anger rising, but reason pulling it back? That's your frontal cortex arguing with your amygdala. Ever cried from a memory you thought you buried? That's your hippocampus and limbic system bringing the past into the present. It's not chaos, it's choreography. And here's something wild. These regions don't just work in isolation. They synchronize. When you concentrate deeply, multiple areas light up in harmony. When you dream, they communicate in strange, beautiful patterns. The cortex builds stories. The limbic system floods them with feeling. The thalamus keeps everything in balance. And sometimes a single thought travels across all of them. A spark becomes a storm. A sensation becomes a decision. A sound becomes a memory. A memory becomes a tear. You don't feel these transitions. They're too fast, too subtle. But they happen thousands of times each minute. Like waves under your skin. Because thought isn't static. It moves. It loops. It rewires itself as you experience the world. And the shape of those loops? That's what makes you you. Not just because of how your brain is built, but because of how you use it. No two brains are wired the same way. Not even identical twins. Because from the moment you're born, every touch, word, face, silence, moment of wonder or fear, it all starts to carve unique patterns in the brain. The architecture might be universal, but the way your storm flows through it, that's personal, unrepeatable, sacred. So as you lie here now, letting the slow hum of your brain carry you towards sleep, just know there are whole cities of thought pulsing under the surface. Regions designed by evolution, sculpted by life, wired by experience, and still changing even now. You are the storm, but you are also the city it moves through. You're deep in the current now, far past the surface static, where the thoughts slow down and the brain shows its patterns. You don't just have thoughts. You have structures that produce them. But even more than that, you have patterns that define who you think you are. That's right. The version of you that you talk to when no one else is around. That's not a fixed object. It's a habit, a rhythm, a learned performance stitched together by repetition. Your identity, your preferences, your beliefs, your impulses is not a solid block. It's the result of patterns of firing in your brain. Certain clusters of neurons light up when you hear your name. Others when you remember where you hid the good snacks. Still others when you feel shame, pride, hope, or déjà vu. And over time, those patterns become familiar. They get stronger, more efficient, like trails in the forest that you've walked again and again. These are your neural pathways, literal roads in your brain carved by experience. And every time you repeat a thought, you reinforce that road. Make it easier to find again. Make it more you. That's how habits are born. Not just of action, but of identity. You don't just check your phone at red lights because you're bored. You do it because your brain has created a loop, a trigger, a behavior, a reward. That loop becomes automatic. It works the same with emotions. If your brain's default response to stress is to panic, that's not weakness. It's a well-traveled road. It means the fear circuits have had a lot of practice, and they've become efficient, fast, reflexive. But here's the key. That road can be changed, because your brain isn't a statue. It's a garden, and every thought is a seed. Every repetition is water. Every choice, no matter how small, tells the neurons, build more of this. So let's look closer at how that happens. The brain learns through something called long-term potentiation. It's not as complicated as it sounds. It just means that when two neurons fire together over and over, connection between them gets stronger. More neurotransmitters are released. More receptors are formed. The synapse becomes stickier. So now when one neuron fires, the other one is more likely to follow. It's like muscle memory, but for thoughts. That's how skills are learned. How trauma is encoded. How relationships shape us. Everything your brain repeats, it believes must be important. Even if it's not. Even if it's harmful. Even if it's a lie you've told yourself 100 times. If the brain hears it enough, it keeps it. But the opposite is also true. If a connection isn't used, it weakens. Eventually it fades. The brain prunes itself, like cutting back overgrown branches. So those thoughts you let go of, those stories you stop feeding, they lose their grip. They get quiet. That's why change is possible. Not through willpower alone, but through repatterning. By creating new loops, new circuits, new associations. Think about this. Every time you sit still and choose to breathe deeply instead of panic, you're not just coping, you're rerouting traffic. Teaching your brain that calm is an option. That silence can be safe. Every time you pause before reacting. Choose kindness over reactivity. Reframe a thought instead of spiraling. You are telling your brain, let's build a different path. This is how healing happens. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet repetitions. In neural threads slowly rewoven. Even your memories work this way. They aren't perfect recordings. They're reconstructions. And every time you recall one, your brain rebuilds it. And in doing so, it alters it. This means your past isn't fixed. It's alive, editable. You can soften a memory, attach it to a safer feeling, make peace with something that once burned. Not by erasing it, but by linking it to a different emotional pattern. That's the quiet storm again, rewriting itself from the inside out. And then, there's the illusion of you, the sense that there's a solid, stable core personality behind all these patterns. But here's the twist. There isn't. Not in the way you think. There's no single part of the brain that holds you. No throne room where the real self lives. Instead, identity emerges from the integration of many patterns. From the sum of your emotions, your memories, your habits, your attention. It's like a song. You hear the melody. You can hum it. But you can't point to one note and say, this is the song, because it's not one thing. It's all of them moving together. You are not a thought. You are not even the thinker. You are the unfolding, the pattern that patterns itself. So lie back now. Let that sink in. The you think of when you say your name, that's a performance built from countless loops. But those loops can change. And when they do, so do you. The thought stream flows on, quieter now, like moonlight trailing across the floor of your mind. You're not just drifting, you're transforming. Because the deeper we go, the more it becomes clear. Your thoughts aren't just happening to you. They're being shaped by attention. You've heard the phrase, you are what you eat. But for your brain, it's more accurate to say you are what you pay attention to. Focus is not just noticing. It's sculpting. It's permission. It's the light you shine on a single dancer in a vast dark room. And when you shine that light, when you give something attention, you're telling your brain, this matters. Build here. Strengthen this pattern. Remember this. Let's break that down. Right now, millions of signals are competing for your brain's attention. The sound of your breath, the ache in your shoulder, the memory of what someone said to you last week, the flicker of something that could be regret, or just guess. Your brain can't process them all. So it picks. It filters. And that filter is your attention system. At the core of that system is a region called the reticular activating system, or RAS if you're feeling fancy. It's a bundle of neurons in your brainstem that acts like a nightclub bouncer for consciousness. It decides which sensory data gets in, which signals make it to awareness, and which ones are sent to the recycling bin. Ever notice that once you learn a new word, you suddenly hear it everywhere? Or when you decide you like a certain kind of car, you see it at every intersection? That's not the world changing. That's your RAS highlighting what you've told it is important. Your attention literally trains your brain to notice certain things and ignore others. And the longer you keep your focus on something, the stronger the neural connections behind it become. This means your thoughts are not just influenced by attention. They're grown by it. Focus isn't just passive. It's neurobiological commitment. Let's take a quick stroll through the brain to see how this works. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain right behind your forehead, is your focus manager. It decides where to point the mental flashlight. It suppresses distractions, holds things in working memory. It's the reason you can finish reading a sentence even when your neighbor's dog starts barking at 2 a.m. But attention doesn't live there alone. It's also shaped by dopamine pathways, which nudge your interest toward whatever feels meaningful or rewarding. That's why it's easier to pay attention to something exciting than something boring. Not because you're lazy, because your brain is trying to optimize energy. Your attention has limits. Think of it as a spotlight, not a floodlight. You can't focus on everything. And when you try, your brain gets tired. In fact, this is why multitasking is a myth. Your brain doesn't truly do two things at once. It just switches back and forth really fast, and each switch comes with a cognitive cost. Attention is expensive. And when you spend it carelessly, the thoughts that grow tend to be chaotic, shallow, scattered. Now here's the profound part. Whatever you consistently give attention to, your brain begins to treat as part of your identity. So if you're always focusing on what's missing, your brain gets better at spotting lack. If you're always focusing on mistakes, your brain gets faster at replaying them. But if you focus, even gently, even imperfectly, on small joys, on presence, on the breath in your nose or the comfort in your spine, your brain builds pathways for peace, for stillness, for safety. This is why meditation isn't just a relaxation tool. It's neurosculpture. When you practice mindfulness, just noticing the breath, the sound of a fan, the warm weight of your body, you're reinforcing attention circuits. You're building stronger prefrontal networks. You're training your RAS to notice this moment. Not the past. Not the spiral. Not the phantom argument that replays itself at 3:41 a.m. Just now. And no. And no. This is also why certain thoughts feel sticky. Why it's so hard to let go of a grudge or an insecurity or a story you told yourself when you were 12. Because your attention looped it. Again and again. Until your brain said, fine, I'll keep it. But attention is not a jail sentence. It's a practice. A choice. Every moment you return to breath, to kindness, to patience with yourself, you reclaim the spotlight. You remind your brain, this is who we are now. And your brain listens. It always has. So tonight, as the outside world dissolves and your inner storm hums softly behind your eyelids, know that you hold a quiet power. The power of focus. The power of choosing what to feed. The power of shaping not just what you see, but who you become. You've gone quiet now. Not because the brain has slowed, but because your awareness has shifted. You're not grasping thoughts anymore. You're watching them float. Like jellyfish in deep water. And this is where things get strange. Because we've talked about neurons and chemicals, circuits and structures, but we haven't yet faced the strangest part of the storm. The observer. The part of you that knows you're thinking. The voice that says, I'm having a thought, not the thought itself. Who is that? This is where science starts to wobble, where language gets weird and definitions blur. Because while your brain creates thoughts and emotions and habits, none of that explains consciousness. Not the content of thought, but the experience of being aware of thought, that strange spotlight of inner seeing, that quiet watcher behind a storm. It's easy to forget how weird this is. You don't just process the world. You experience it. You don't just recall memories. You revisit them. You feel like you are somewhere inside, riding the waves of it all. So, where is that you? Point to it. Is it behind your eyes? In your chest? Everywhere? Nowhere. The truth is, no scientist has ever found a specific location in the brain for consciousness. There's no consciousness gland, no light bulb in the skull that switches on. Instead, we think it emerges from integration. Not one place, but many regions working together in just the right rhythm. Think of an orchestra. Each section plays its part. Strings, brass, percussion. Alone, they're just noise. But when they synchronize, music, a rising awareness. In your brain, that orchestra might include your prefrontal cortex, your parietal lobe, your thalamus, even deep structures like the colostrum. A mysterious, thin sheet of neurons that some scientists believe helps unify experience. But no one agrees. And maybe they never will. Because consciousness may not be a thing to find, but a process that unfolds. A storm that watches itself. Some theories call this global workspace theory, the idea that when certain neural processes gain enough attention, they're broadcast across the brain. They become available to the whole system. Like a memo going out on the office intercom. That's when you notice. That's when a thought becomes conscious. Other theories, like integrated information theory, suggest that consciousness arises from complexity itself. From systems that contain both differentiation and unity. The more a system can integrate diverse parts into a single, inseparable whole, the more conscious it is. But those are just theories. Models trying to describe the indescribable. Because here's the truth. You can study every corner of the brain. You can map every neuron. But you still can't explain why red looks like red. Why music feels like magic. Why the sound of rain gives you peace. That's the hard problem of consciousness. The gap between function and feeling. Between what the brain does and what it's like to be. Science can tell us how input becomes output. But it can't yet explain the flavor of awareness. The fact that anything feels like anything at all. And that's the mystery you're carrying. Even now, as you lie here in stillness, your storm hasn't gone silent. It's just folded in on itself. It's watching from somewhere inside, or maybe nowhere at all. Because you are not just the thoughts, not just the circuits, not even the emotions. You are the one experiencing them. You are the soft attention at the center of the storm. So what do we do with that? Do we call it the soul, the self, the observer? Or do we let it remain nameless? Presence, a light in the fog, something you can't grasp, but always are. Even if consciousness is just an emergent property of complex matter, that doesn't make it any less sacred. Because what a miracle! That a web of cells, wired by chance, fired by evolution, can sit in a quiet room and wonder about its own existence. And not just wonder, but weep, laugh, love, dream, fall asleep under stars it invented. You are stardust with self-awareness, a thunderstorm that can name its own lightning, a pattern of patterns that looks inward and says, I am, so go ahead, breathe deeper. Let the thoughts drift past. Let the mystery stay soft. There's no need to solve it. Just marvel at the fact that you can even ask. Because you, whatever you are here, still, quiet, and infinite. You're floating now, weightless inside yourself, somewhere between waking and the dark velvet of sleep. The thoughts don't feel like words anymore. They're shapes, textures, echoes. And this is where the brain gets poetic and paradoxical. Because for all this talk of attention and circuits and neurochemistry, your thoughts don't just appear like dots on a spreadsheet. They arrive with meaning. They carry weight. They come with context. And that context, that's where your brain's storytelling engine takes over. Let's talk about narrative. Because whether you realize it or not, your brain is constantly spinning stories. Not fairy tales or novels, but interpretations. Strings of meaning that help you survive in a world far too chaotic to take in all at once. You're not just seeing a red light. You're thinking, stop. Someone might run it. You're not just hearing your name. You're thinking, what did I do wrong? You're not just remembering your childhood. You're saying, that's who I've always been. And all those are stories. Micronarratives stitched together from emotion, memory, and belief. The brain doesn't like raw data. It likes frameworks. Beginning, middle, cause effect. Hero, obstacle, resolution. It's doing this constantly. Not to entertain you, to protect you. Because a story helps you predict. And prediction is survival. If you can understand what happened before, you have a better chance of controlling what happens next. Even if the story is wrong, even if it hurts, your brain would rather have a painful narrative than none at all. This is why the stories you tell yourself matter. Why the voice in your head has such power. It's not just background noise. It's the lens through which all of life is colored. And often, that voice isn't yours. Not originally. It was shaped by parents, teachers, peers, the way someone looked at you in fourth grade, the words you overheard but never forgot. And those fragments, they loop, they compound, they turn into your identity script. Then conscious story you tell about who you are, what you deserve, and how the world sees you. Maybe your story says, I mess things up, or I'm too much, or I never finish what I start. Maybe it says, I always keep it together, or I don't ask for help, or if I stop moving, I fall apart. These aren't truths. They're narratives. And the brain, being efficient, learns to favor them, to strengthen the neural roads that lead to those conclusions. And yet, just like every other pattern in this storm, stories can be rewritten. Not with blind optimism, not with fake affirmations, but with curiosity and repetition and patience. When you challenge an old thought, when you gently ask, is that true? Is that mine? You begin to loosen its grip. You open space for a new sentence, a new thread, a new version of you. This is the power of metacognition, thinking about your thinking, noticing the voice instead of merging with it, observing the storm instead of believing you are the storm. It's subtle. It takes practice. But over time, it changes everything. Because when you change your story, you change which emotions rise, which memories resurface, which actions feel possible. You change the path your brain takes by default. And this isn't just theory. It's biology. When you create a new interpretation, a new lens, you form new neural associations. New synapses fire together. The next time a trigger appears, there's a chance the thought will follow the new road instead of the old one. That chance grows with each repetition, each mindful breath, each choice to say, wait, what if that's not true anymore? This is what makes humans extraordinary. We don't just think. We reframe. We don't just observe. We reinterpret. And through that reinterpretation, we heal. We grow. We rebuild the very structure of who we think we are. So if you've lived inside a story that hurt you, one that made you small or silent or scared, know that it's not the whole truth. It never was. And if you're unsure how to begin to rewrite, start here. Maybe I'm allowed to change, or maybe I've always been more than I thought. You don't need to know the ending yet. Just the next line. Just the next breath. Because the brain you're lying inside right now, it is listening. It is updating. It is learning the story of tonight. And you get to help write it. So soften your eyes. Let your thoughts pass like clouds. And whisper something new into the dark. The night has gone quiet around you. The world a soft hush. Your thoughts drifting like snowflakes, delicate, slow, dissolving before they land. You've moved past the turbulence of what you think. Now we're touching something deeper. Not thoughts, but states of mind. Moods, modes, shifts in the atmosphere of your awareness. These aren't about single ideas or sharp memories. These are the climates your brain moves through. Invisible, but powerful. And just like weather systems, your mind flows through brainwave states. You've heard the terms, probably alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma. They sound like a fraternity or a spaceship crew. But they're the rhythms of your inner world. Your brain is electric. That much we've seen. But it's not just about whether neurons fire. It's when. How often? The frequency. Think of brain waves as the tempo of your internal music. Fast beats, slow pulses, flowing patterns. Each rhythm reflects a different kind of consciousness. Let's start at the surface. Beta waves. Fast, focused, alert. You're in beta when you're problem solving, arguing with yourself, overthinking a text message. It's the default during your busy day. But too much beta, and you're spinning, anxious, drained, stuck in the topsoil of your mind. When you start to relax, when you exhale, stretch, close your eyes, you drop into alpha waves, slower, smoother. This is the gateway, the liminal space between thought and rest. It's where creativity wakes up, where daydreaming happens, where insights sneak in sideways. Drop deeper. You reach theta waves. These are slower still, dreamy, fluid. This is twilight territory, where memories mingle with imagination, where meditation begins to deepen, where your subconscious whispers from the back rooms of the mind. Go even deeper, and you find delta waves, the slowest, the deepest. This is deep sleep, baby. Non-dreaming, restorative, where your body repairs, where the mind clears out the clutter. It's like power washing your brain with silence. Then, oddly enough, there's gamma. Super fast, barely perceptible, linked to higher level processing, learning, sometimes even mystical experiences. It's rare, like glimpses of lightning, burst of clarity, a moment of awe. Now here's the amazing part. Your brain moves between these waves constantly. It's not stuck in one state. It flows. You can shift from beta to alpha with a few deep breaths, from theta to delta as you drift off, from gamma flashes when insight strikes. This means that your state of mind is fluid. You're not locked in. You're not always anxious or distracted or foggy. You're simply moving through waves. And those waves, they're influenced by everything. Light, sound, breath, posture, music, memory, even the voice in your head. Think about that. The same brain that overthinks in the morning can dream in watercolor by night. The same neurons that loop self-doubt at noon can whisper poetry in alpha at dusk. Your inner world is a tide. It rises, falls, reshapes. And if you learn to feel those shifts, to surf the rhythm, you don't have to fight every thought. You can just wait. Wait for the next wave. And this matters because different states of mind are better for different kinds of thoughts. Need to focus? You'll want to be in low, beta, alert but calm. Need to reflect? Alpha's your friend. Need to release? Sink into theta. Need to heal? Delta will take you in its arms. This is also why sleep is so sacred. When you sleep, you're not just resting. You're restoring rhythm. Your brain clears waste, consolidates memories, balances hormones. It reboots your emotional circuits. Ever noticed how everything feels worse at night, but solvable after sleep? That's not magic. It's neurocleansing. The storm resets itself. And yes, your thoughts can still swirl during sleep. Dreams are proof of that. But in sleep, the brain doesn't prioritize logic. It prioritizes emotion. It files the day's feelings. Sometimes with stories. Sometimes with symbols. Sometimes with images so weird, you wake up wondering who installed the disco ball in your subconscious. It's all part of the process. Your brain is processing you even when you're not looking. So tonight, as you lie here between alpha and theta, know this. You are not stuck in the thoughts you had today. You are not trapped in the state you woke up in. You are changing frequency. Gently, slowly, beautifully. You are the music of your own brain. The conductor and the audience. The storm and the eye. And every breath carries you closer to silence. Let it. You're doing just fine. It's quiet now. Quieter than before. Like standing in a library inside your own skull, listening to the hum of 1,000 sleeping thoughts. You're not chasing ideas anymore. You're watching them arrive, form, fade, leave no ripple. But beneath that still surface, your brain isn't idle. No, it's working in a secret mode. Welcome to the Default Mode Network, your brain's backstage crew. The system that lights up when you're doing nothing. That's right. When you're not focused on a task, not solving a puzzle or watching a show, your brain slips into this introspective network. And it loves it there. You know the feeling. When your mind wanders. When you replay a memory for the 50th time. When you imagine that awkward conversation going differently. When you invent entire arguments in the shower with people who aren't even there. That's the Default Mode Network, or DMN. A set of brain regions that lights up when you turn inward. It includes your medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, parts of the parietal lobe, basically the regions responsible for self-reflection, time travel through memory, and imagining what others might think of you. So when you're lost in thought, you're not lazy. You're running high-level internal simulations. This is how your brain makes sense of identity, how it stitches together the past with the present and predicts the future. It's not just random musing. It's rehearsal, integration, forecasting. But, and here's where it gets interesting. The Default Mode Network is also where things can go sideways. Because the same system that lets you reflect also lets you ruminate. It's where self-criticism lives, where anxiety builds its timelines, where depression replays its saddest hits. The DMN is like a movie projector. If you're conscious of what it's showing, you can choose the genre. But if it's running on autopilot, it'll loop whatever scripts it's most familiar with. That's why some days feel heavier than others, even when nothing bad has happened. Because your brain has wandered into the storm without a map and started telling stories you didn't ask for. But here's the key. You can become aware of the default mode. You can't always turn it off, but you can redirect it. With curiosity, with gentleness, with just enough presence to say, "Oh, the projector's on again. Let's watch what it's showing." This is where practices like mindfulness, journaling, even walking in silence come in. They help you witness your inner movies without starring in them. You can step back, let the images play, and whisper, "Interesting." Not truth, just thought. And over time, something beautiful happens. The default mode network becomes less reactive, less tangled, more open. Instead of rumination, it offers reflection. Instead of judgment, insight. It becomes a place where daydreams and healing can coexist. This is also the network that activates when you imagine other people's thoughts and feelings. Empathy lives here. Compassion. The ability to step into another mind and say, "I see you." So even when your thoughts feel selfish or self-obsessed, that's not weakness. That's just the DMN trying to orient you inside a social world. It's how we build the idea of self in relation to others. And yes, this network quiets during deep focus, during meditation, during certain forms of sleep. But it doesn't vanish. It waits, like a thoughtful narrator, ready to return the moment you ask, "Why did I react that way? What am I really feeling? What would I say if I weren't scared?" That's the power of it. It asks questions you might not want to ask, but need to. And here's one more twist. In moments of awe, in peak creative flow, when the sense of self disappears, the default mode network quiets, dissolves. That's not failure. That's liberation. Because for a few seconds, you're not constructing the story. You are the experience. Just the breath. Just the wind on your skin. Just the now. And then softly, the network returns. Not as a tyrant, but as a librarian. Sifting through what just happened. Filing it into memory. So tonight, as you lie here in the dark, your focus drifting, your breath slow, know that the theater of your mind is still flickering. But you don't have to act in the play. You can just sit in the front row. Let the scenes unfold. Let the storm pass across the screen. And remind yourself, it's just a showing. You can always leave the theater. The air feels softer now. Time slower. Like the storm inside your head has turned to mist, curling around your thoughts, not crashing through them. You're resting deeper, thinking less, feeling more. And now it's time to talk about something so ordinary, you forget it's the most powerful thing your brain ever learned to do. Language. Because before you could count, or plan, or overthink that thing you said at lunch, you learned to name, to give sound a feeling, to point to the world and say, that's mine, to say, I'm hungry, I'm scared, I love you, or go away. Language is not just a tool. It's the scaffolding of consciousness. It lets you hold thoughts in your mind long enough to shape them. It lets you remember, dream, write this sentence down in a journal and say, wow, I'm really like this, huh? But let's go deeper. What is language, really? It starts in the Broca's area, in your left frontal lobe. That's the speech center. The word architect. It assembles grammar, sentence structure, the bones of meaning. Then there's Wernicke's area, farther back. That's comprehension, your meaning filter. It makes sure what you hear doesn't sound like static. It turns noises into ideas. And both these regions are just the visible peaks of something much deeper. A brain-wide network that connects vision, hearing, memory, movement, even emotion. Because when you speak, you're not just moving your mouth. You're pulling from memory, from feeling, from imagination. You're lighting up so many circuits that scientists still argue about how it all works. And somehow it does, in real time, without you noticing. You form about 4 to 6 internal thoughts per second, most of them with words. That's thousands of microsentences per hour. An endless scroll of narration, like you're writing your own closed captions. But here's the twist. You don't just use language to express thought. You use it to shape it. That's right. The words you have influence the thoughts you can have. For example, some languages have 50 words for snow. Others don't have separate words for blue and green. Some don't use past or future tense the way you do. And those differences change how speakers perceive time, color, memory. It's called linguistic relativity, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, if you're feeling nerdy. And it suggests that language doesn't just reflect your mind. It builds it. If your language lacks a word for regret, does that mean you never feel it? Or that you feel it but call it something else, something quieter? If your inner monologue constantly says, I should have, does that pull your entire mind toward the past? The labels you use become the thoughts you think. And the more often you use them, the more they define the storm. So let's try something radical. What if you gave yourself better words? Not fancier, not forced, just more gentle, more curious. Instead of, I'm such an idiot, try, that surprised me. Instead of, I always ruin things, try, that didn't go how I hoped. Instead of, I'm broken, try, something in me is hurting. Words don't fix everything, but they frame everything. And in a brain built on meaning, that frame shapes your reality. You can't silence your inner voice completely, but you can teach it a different tone, one that reflects truth and kindness, accountability and self-respect. Because the storm inside isn't just noise. It's narration. It's the way your brain makes sense of chaos. And here's a little secret. You don't have to believe everything you say to yourself. You're allowed to hear a thought and respond. Thanks, but no. You're allowed to rewrite, rephrase, reclaim, even silently, especially silently, because even your inner language reshapes your brain. Each gentle word a thread that weaves calm back into the fabric of thought. So lie still. Let your voice go quiet. Let your language soften. You don't need to explain anything to yourself right now. You don't need the right metaphor, the perfect sentence, the clever closure. You are already the poem. You're not really thinking anymore, are you? Not in the usual sense. The edges of your awareness have smoothed out, like soft clay under warm hands. And if you listen closely, you'll notice something subtle. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of sensation. full of presence, full of something that came before the words, before the stories, before the noise. We've talked so much about thoughts, how they rise, how they loop, how they lie. But beneath every thought, there is a body. And your body is not just a passenger in the storm. It's the sky it travels through. Welcome to the realm of embodied cognition. The idea that your brain doesn't think alone. It thinks with your body, through it, in response to it. You don't just feel emotions in your head. You feel them in your chest, your gut, your fingertips. You say things like heartache and gut feeling and butterflies. And those aren't just metaphors. They're maps. Because your brain and your body are in constant conversation. Signals flowing up and down the vagus nerve, that great wandering highway connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, stomach, and beyond. It tells your brain what's happening in your body, and your brain adjusts its thoughts accordingly. If your breath is fast, your brain thinks, we must be in danger. If your gut tightens, it says, we're not safe, even if there's no real threat. Just a memory, a sound, a shadow on the wall. And that's the quiet truth of it. Your thoughts are profoundly physical. They're shaped by posture, by tension, by whether you're clenching your jaw or holding your breath without knowing it. The brain listens to the body, and the body listens back. It's a loop. And in this loop, presence becomes a tool. Let's test it. Feel your jaw right now. Loosen it. Unclench your teeth. Drop your shoulders. Let your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Now take a breath, deeper than before, and let it go slowly. No rush, no finish line, just a gone. Notice what just happened. Your thoughts slowed too, not because you silenced them, but because you invited the body to lead. That's embodied cognition. It's why a walk can clear your head better than any spreadsheet. Why crying often happens before you know why you're upset. Why lying down in the fetal position can make your body feel safer, because it remembers what safety felt like. And when you ignore your body, your thoughts get louder, sharper, tighter, like a storm trapped in a box that's too small. But when you include the body, when you move, stretch, hum, sing, breathe, cry, you give the storm room to move. You invite it to pass. This is also why trauma is not just a mental scar. It's a somatic imprint, held in the nervous system, stored in the fascia, encoded in the posture you default to when someone raises their voice or when your phone buzzes with that name. And healing, it doesn't start with insight alone. It begins when the body learns that it's safe again, not just in theory, but in breath, in stillness, in motion. So tonight, let the body speak. Without words, let it settle into the bed. Let your spine melt like candle wax. Let your face drop its mask, and your breath return to its natural rhythm. You don't have to solve the mind. You just have to listen to the vessel it sails in. Because sometimes the quietest thought is not a sentence, but a sensation. A tingle behind the eyes, pulse in the wrist, a warmth in the chest that says, we're okay. You can rest now. You've spent a lifetime in your head, but you've always lived in your body. And it has been so patient with you, so loyal, even when you forgot to check in, even when the storm got loud. So tonight, as thoughts drift and fade like fog, let the body lead. Let it anchor you, cradle you, tell you the truth. You are not a floating mind. You are a whole being, and the storm has always known your name. And now here you are, drifting at the edge of yourself. Thoughts, barely whispers, breath, featherlight. You've come all this way, through the circuits and storms and stories of your mind. And somehow, even in all that complexity, there's a stillness underneath it, like the quiet center of a spinning galaxy. Let's linger here for just a little longer, because we haven't yet talked about the rarest kind of thought, the one that doesn't chatter, doesn't plan, doesn't explain, the kind of thought that simply watches. It's called meta-awareness. And it's not just thinking about thinking. It's knowing that you're thinking. It's the part of you that can say, oh, that's a worry, instead of, I am worried. It's subtle, easily missed, but it's where your greatest freedom lives. Meta awareness is what allows you to pause, to choose, to notice a pattern, and not be swallowed by it. Most thoughts rise and run before you even know they were there. But meta awareness, that's the gentle flashlight that lets you see them before they crash into your mood, your day, your identity. It doesn't demand anything. It just offers the gift of space. You've likely felt it before, even without naming it. That moment after a big emotion when you say, "Wow, that was intense." Or the breath you take after a mental spiral when you realize, "I'm here. It's okay. That wasn't forever." That's meta-awareness, the quiet perch above the weather, where the storm can be seen, not become. And here's the grace of it. You don't have to hold it all the time. You just have to remember it's there. Return to it gently, each time you forget, because forgetting is part of the rhythm. You drift. You return. You get caught. You soften. You identify with the thought. Then you blink and say, "Oh, that's not me." And in that moment, however small, something rewires. A habit loosens. A reflex softens. A new groove forms in the neural soil of your mind. This isn't just philosophy. It's practice. Neuroplasticity, the brain's way of saying, every return is progress. Every gentle noticing is a seed. And the more often you return to that quiet perch, the more familiar it becomes. Less fragile. More available. Until one day you find yourself in the middle of a storm, and you smile. Not because you like it, but because you recognize it. You say, "Ah yes, this old wave. Hello again." You may pass. No judgment. No panic. Just presence. That's the gift of thought. Not control. Not perfection. But relationship. You don't conquer your mind. You become its companion. You sit with it. Learn its rhythms. Forgive its noise. And in doing so, you become the softest kind of strong. And now, look where you are. Not in a classroom. Not in a therapy session. Not in a mental tug-of-war. Just here. In this room. In this body. In this moment. Listening. Breathing. Drifting. There's nothing left to fix. Nothing left to figure out. Only the gentle truth that thought will come. And thought will go. And you are the sky it all moves through. So rest now. Let it all float. The brain can keep whispering if it wants to. But you don't need to follow. You've heard enough. You've come far enough. You've remembered what's real. Close your eyes. Soften your mind. And melt into the quiet. And now, let the night take over. You don't need to hold anything anymore. Not the questions. Not the thoughts. Not even the breath. Let it all settle like dust in a golden beam of sunlight. Slow, silent, sacred. There's nothing left for your mind to solve tonight. No roles to perform. No identities to maintain. Just the comfort of being exactly here. Exactly as you are. Your body has done enough. Your brain has done enough. Your awareness, that soft, unblinking flame inside you, can dim now. Not extinguished, just rested, cradled. And as the storm of thought recedes into the distance, not gone, but quiet, you return to the still field beneath it all. That part of you that was never caught in the weather. The part that simply is. You're allowed to feel safe now. Held by the rhythm of your breath, the hush of the room, the knowing that there's no right way to think. Only your way. And that's enough. So sink deeper. Let your thoughts become mist. Let your muscles release their stories. Let your inner voice grow softer. Then softer still, until it dissolves into the silence. Good night. Sleep deeply. You've earned the quiet.